People think something's wrong with me that I still work here, but I love it. And why do you leave a job if you love it and you love working for the people that you work for, and you know people and then you know their families, and I think it's a great privilege. Rayna Pettet and I work at the Bathurst Aboriginal Legal Service, and I started in Sydney about 30 years ago. And at that time I was the only female solicitor in the Aboriginal Legal Service. And then they said it was my turn to be transferred to the country. Had the choice of going to Grafton or Cowra, and I went to Cowra. Yeah. It's really good. It's not like any other job, you know, because I'd had other jobs before, and worked in private practice and as a judge's associate and so on, but it's just the best. Agnes Coe was the office manager, and the office was in her backyard at that time, and was just with the Aboriginal health officer, and our office was just this little tiny, I had a desk as you walked in the door, and my desk was there, and everyone walked past me and kept going to go to the other Aboriginal organisations, the Koori Housing Company, and I don't know if they had the Land Council. That was all starting, all the land rights stuff was starting when I went to Cowra. And at that time we did, we went to Lake Jellicoe, Condobolin, Forbes Parks, Orange, Bathurst, Katoomba, Lithgow, did Cowra of course, and we did Canberra, Goulburn, Yass, and we covered all the jails that were all in those areas. We're thinking, where are we going tomorrow? So, yeah, it was terrific though, because you had the Canberra with the people that lived in Canberra, and Goulburn, you know, but Canberra, those kind of people that had lived there, the extreme of going to Lake Jellicoe, you know, where they lived on the mission, and they'd been forced to move to Lake Jellicoe and live on the mission. One of the people I used to see over there, she remembered as a child going there, you know, as a young person going there, and in the back of a truck, so it was that recent, you know. And when we were in Condobolin, we had a volunteer field officer. Well, we had two, a husband and wife, Bonnie Merritt and her husband. In those days things were, I suppose a lot more people did things for free, yeah. And they had done it, I think, they did it for over 20 years. And people would come to them and speak, you know, say they had to go to court and give them their court papers, sometimes ask them to contact us, and we'd go round after court and go round to their houses, and I felt it was a great privilege because they knew Bonnie and trusted her, and then they got to know me. They'd invite us into their home, and on the whole, Aboriginal people, for good reasons, you know, were quite reluctant to ask people to come into their homes and things like that. And sometimes they'd show you, I remember one lady showing us, you know, documents to do with, you know, the history of their family and what it was like to be Aboriginal and live in those small country towns, and permits and things, all sorts of dreadful things that, you know, how they were treated. Yeah, so, and Aggie was an absolutely fantastic person to work with, and she was a fantastic boss, and she was very caring about the people, but very honest, very you know, always used to wait up till whenever I got back from court, unless she was away at meetings, but she'd just be there whatever time I got back with all my messages, and can I ring this one and that one, and just to make sure I got back safely and all that sort of thing. She was terrific. Many years ago we would be trusted to, like, this is the difference in getting someone into you represent somebody, they've got a drinking problem, you know, police know, everybody knows. So you'd ring up the rehab and say, I've got so-and-so, they want to come to rehab, have you got a bed? And they'd, like, I'd ring Linden House, and they'd say, oh, we'll just have a look, oh, you sure he's interested, you know, you really think he's keen? I go, oh yes, I think so. We'll bring him if you've got a bed. So they'd say, yes, go on, bring him. And then we'd go back and say to the court, well, you know, we've got a place. it was all done verbally, and we'll transport them when court finishes today, and they'll stay there. It used to be much longer than 3 months. In those days it was a long time. Sometimes you could stay there for 10 months. And then we'd pick them up on the way back, going to court. We'd pick them up and take them to court again or something like that. But of course everything changes, and it's not done like that anymore. It's much, much more complicated, have to be formally assessed, have to go on a waiting list, and it's nowhere near as easy. And the rules keep changing all the time, so it's very hard. But that was, and we also used to have, there was another man called Bill Rutter, if I got his surname right, and he was from West Wyalong, and he started a rehab out there, and he used to come to Condobolin and Lake Jellicoe. As he said, as soon as he drove into the mission, they'd all run and hide because they knew why he was there. He was an ex-alcoholic who wasn't, formerly an alcoholic, so he knew what it was like to really be, in the gutter and all that. But he used to come to court with us, and he'd say, well, yes, I'll ring up, and he'd get a vacancy for them in various places, and then he'd take them, from the court, and then he'd bring them back again, when they were finished. And the courts liked that, all that. The courts wanted to give people a chance, if they could, I think. So in the old days, you didn't need to get quite so much, you were, permission all the time for so many things to do. As you were just trusted to get on with and do what you knew you had to do and all that sort of stuff. But it's much bigger now. The organisation is so much bigger, so they've, But as to the office here, we have the most fantastic office here of people. It's absolutely fantastic having staff that really care about the clients and really, do the best they possibly can. It's really good. And some of them have been absolutely fantastic field officers who understood the concepts. They mightn't have studied law, but they could pick it up really well. Paul Elborn, Kim used to be a field officer. Different people that have been field officers over the time have a great understanding, can pick up things and have a great understanding. Bill Allen understood a lot, and when they're good field officers, they are an absolute advantage, and they are, they do make the clients feel more comfortable, and they do, it is good. It's very good. Yeah. But sometimes they were not as good as that. And then we used to have an Aboriginal Children's Service down there. It was involved in what we now call care proceedings, when Doc's welfare would take the kids, and they were involved in foster placements, and we used to do that sort of thing at that time. And they'd also sometimes, I think, do children's court, try and, I suppose a lot of the kids we represented were state wards or foster placement kids. It was really sad. It was very, very sad. The Children's Service used to, in the early days, have a system of foster, eventually they were allowed to get the children into their care, and then they'd arrange the foster placements. So Agnes Coe, when she finished, when the old ALS closed and they didn't offer her a job because she was Paul's mother, I think, she transferred to the Children's Service, and she used to be involved in getting the foster placements out in the country, because she used to cover a huge area out west. When I worked still down in the Sydney office, I can remember we used to do anything. We did everything in this, early days. There was not so much of a, we only do this, we only do that. We did everything we possibly could. And I can remember Ian McIntyre got instructions from Moree for a man who wanted to stop the adoption of his baby. He had a child to a white lady, a young lady, she's only very young, pretty young, and she didn't want to keep the baby, and she wanted the baby adopted, and they had organised it through the Catholic Adoption Agency. They already had the foster family organised, and I met them later when I represented their sons, as it turned out, and and he wanted the chance to bring the child up, which 30 years ago or whatever it was, something like that. That was very unusual, but you had to bring an application to the Supreme Court. So Ian, on the phone, got all the instructions, prepared the affidavits, including a white lady that this lad's mother worked for and was going to help look after the child, his mother, and she owned a farm of very unusual birds that they provided to restaurants, you know, for the meat. And she came down, and they all came to Sydney, and I was on holiday, so I went and listened, and they ran this case, including a whatever you call him, specialist man, who came and said Aboriginal children should be with Aboriginal people, should stay with their parents if at all possible. And he won that case and got to raise that little boy himself, which was amazing. You know, but that's the sort of thing, it came up and it needed to be done. And a lot of people have put a lot of hard work and a lot of hours and over the years. It's just a pity so many people come and go. People think something's wrong with me that I still work here, but I love it. And why do you leave a job if you love it? And you love working for the people that you work for, and you know people, and then you know their families and know their children that grow up, and you represent them, unfortunately, you know, but I mean, at least you know people and you know what's going on. And I think it's a great privilege to... The ALS is not like anything else that I've worked in private practice and all those things. I mean, it's not like legal aid, not that I've actually worked for legal aid, but it's a unique place to work.